Hi nerds. Welcome back to my channel, Homo Librariensis. I haven't done a bit of a wrap up in a while, so I've read, I don't know, since it's been so long, I've probably read 10 or 15 books since that time, but there's some of them that aren't really worth mentioning or I've mentioned in other wrap ups. So I'll kind of just briefly mention those. But I've read a few good ones recently that I really enjoyed. Some of them are booktube favorites, but I'll give my 2 cents about them. The one I just finished was The Tidal Zone by Sarah Moss, and I had to order this one from the UK because I don't think it's ever published in Canada. I asked for the library here to get it, and they said it was never published here, so I ordered that one, and I'm very glad that I did. I mean, it didn't cost very much, and it didn't come in great condition. Luckily, I buy my books at library book sales anyway, so that's not a big worry for me, but I really enjoyed it. I usually require a little bit more to happen. I'm not 100% into books that don't have sort of a clear, there's a clear trajectory of this book. It is definitely a story, but it's more character focused. It's more of a character study. Basic premise of the book you find out right away. It's a family. It's told from the perspective of the father, who's a stay-at-home dad, and his wife is a doctor. And they have 2 daughters who are 8 and 15, I think. The older one has a surprise anaphylaxis and nearly dies. And then the whole book is just kind of about how they deal with that. And normally I would find that, like, it's a reasonably long book. It's 330 pages. And I would normally find that a little bit much in terms of just, again, character development. It's really all about how they deal with this, but it was so well written. This is my first time ever reading any Sarah Moss, and it's just absolutely beautiful. The way she words things, the way she describes things, I really appreciate the way she writes characters. I liked the father's perspective of the book. I found the daughter, that was I wavered on so the 15-year-old daughter is this sort of typical 15-year-old in the fact that she's kind of sarcastic and impatient and, kind of embarrassed by her parents, etc. But she's also exceptionally sort of, she's witty, but more exceptionally well-versed in the goings-on of the world and very, very political and aware. And it just seemed like a bit much for a 15-year-old. Now, I don't know very many 15-year-olds now, or any, and the world is a different place from when I was 15 since the internet barely existed. Maybe it's perfectly reasonable to other people reading this book, but to me she just seemed like a little bit unbelievable. She was a little too clever and smart. I almost didn't quite buy it. So there was that, but overall I really love this book. I'm so glad. I think it's a favorite of Jen Campbell's, so that was a great recommendation from her channel. Speaking of Jen Campbell, I read Beyond the Pale by Emily Urquhart, and she read this book a few years ago and absolutely loved it. It's a non-fiction book written by, I was just really pleasantly surprised. I didn't realize it was set a lot in Canada, and it was written by a Canadian woman whose daughter was born with albinism, and she's also already a folklorist, I believe, so she decides to kind of track down a lot of the folklore about albinism, and the history of it in her family, and kind of, it's not a mystery per se, but it's actually quite fascinating, and just the learning they go through and the emotions that they go through, and her process of going from really being afraid for her daughter and wishing that this hadn't sort of happened to them, and then going from there to not being able to imagine their family or their daughter in any other way. So it was a little less on the folklore side, actually. I was expecting more folklore. Like, they really just focus on a few beliefs and not even really the why of people in Tanzania, and I think 1 or 2 American myths. So I was expecting more. I really wanted it to be a few more tales of folklore around albinism, but overall it was still a really excellent book, and I think I gave it 4 stars. Another one I read that I've already wrapped up, so I'll say it just briefly, is Soviet Milk by Nora Ikstena, and I absolutely loved it. And just like I said in my other review, which I'll try to, I've never used the card, so we'll see if there's a card up there. I figured it out. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a beautifully written book, and I happened to read it or half of it while I was in Riga, which is one of the places where the book is set. It is a Latvian book, so translated from Latvian. Okay. The other book I read, this was for my In Real Life book club, and it was my partner's pick, although technically I picked it because I said that this is what I was going to pick for my next book, and she said, oh great, well I picked before you, so that's what I'm picking for my next book. So whatever, I got to read it anyway, and I'd been wanting to read some Han Kang, so I read The Vegetarian by Han Kang. It's translated from Korean, and I need to get better at figuring out who the translator was. I always give my books back to the library before I ever get to go over them, so I will do better. Wow. Okay, this one gets a lot of buzz on BookTube. I mean, a little while ago because I'm not quite kind of up with the times, but it's about, basically I don't even know how to describe what it's about. It's about a woman in Korea, fairly modern Korea, contemporary Korea, who chooses to become a vegetarian, and the reaction of the people around her, primarily family members. And so it's actually, you never hear from her perspective, you only hear from her husband and her brother-in-law and her sister. It is nothing like I was expecting it to be. It was wow. I don't know if anyone in the group liked it. I mean, I think everyone was glad they read it. It's not a big group. There's only 5 of us. And I think everyone was glad that they read it. But I don't know if they enjoyed it. I probably liked it the most out of others. They gave us a lot to talk about. Yeah, I don't even know how to talk about it without giving too much away. I mean, it's not... What would be fascinating is to know how someone reading this, living in Korea, born in Korea, if they picked this up, read it in Korean, how they would react, if they would have the same... Or what would stand out to them. Because the things that stand out to us were often very cultural, about just sort of how poorly she was treated, and even in one instance fetishized for this decision. And I don't know, I don't have any context to know how much of this would have been, for a Korean person reading it, still absolutely shocking, which I'm imagining it would be, and maybe how much of it would have been just an accepted part of culture. So I'm not really sure if it was just sort of I guess I should say, it's difficult as someone looking into a story set in a different culture, knowing how much is just me judging this as someone's terrible family, just like a bunch of awful, unlikable people, and how much of it is just me not understanding certain parts of a culture that are different from mine. So that was really hard to sort out. Definitely worth a read. I would read Han Kang again. I would really like to read Human Acts by Han Kang. I don't think anyone else in our book club would read Han Kang again. So there's that, I guess. And then I read the Seanan McGuire, the first 2 of the Seanan McGuire Every Heart a Doorway series. So Every Heart a Doorway and Down Among the Sticks and Bones. And they're really short. I guess they're novellas. They're probably under 100 pages, and they're set in this world, or this school or world, where kids who have gone to sort of magical worlds and returned are sent to kind of, I guess, let go of their experiences or learn about their experiences, and to have some support from other people who have gone through the same thing. But I'd heard a lot of people talking about this book, and what drew me to it was that they said that there was a lot of representation of other different genders, sexualities, just ways of living, identities. There's an asexual character. So that's what drew me to the book. And while that is a part of the book, it's not a huge focus, which I think is good. I mean, I think it's good to normalize characters who have different identities. So I thought that was great. And I don't regret reading them. What I didn't realize was that I guess I kind of thought they were from magical worlds like that we know, that these had been people who had went to the place that Alice in Wonderland was, and like, but it's not. It's these children who have gone to these sort of fantastical worlds, and they're all a little bit different, and no one goes to the same one, and they all have different characteristics, and so some of them have lived a long time in these like very disordered worlds, and some lived in very happy candy worlds, and some lived in these dark, terrible worlds. So that's what I will say, is these stories are so much darker and more gruesome than I was ever expecting them to be. I really enjoyed them. I will continue reading the series. I'd like to get the next one. I was just on vacation, so I didn't get it out, but yeah, they were fantastic, but for completely different reasons than I was expecting. So I really enjoyed those. So that's what I read recently. I have a few books on the go, but the one that I really dove into recently was Dopesick by Beth Macy. Dopesick: Dealers, Doctors, and the Drug Company That Addicted America. So it just came out this year, just recently, I think in August or September, and it's basically a history of where opium came from, where opioids came from, the previous sort of epidemic or public health hazard, the crisis they had in like the late 1800s with opium, and then how this all was renewed. And most of it's being pinned on Purdue Pharma, who's the company that created this drug, and I think probably very deservedly. And it seems very well researched. It's not a John Krakauer book. It's not written in a way that is almost more story. It is very kind of factual, but it's well put together. It's easy to read, and I'm learning so much. But yeah, it's not so much like that almost lyrical journalism that some authors do put out with nonfiction. It's not like that. So if you need that, then it's not that kind of book. But just it is well written. It's easy to read. It's really good. So Dopesick by Beth Macy is what I'm in right now, as well as Uneducated by Tara Westover. But I am behind my wrap-ups. So that's what I've read recently. If you've read any of these, let me know what you thought. If you think I'd like something else because I liked these, I'd love to hear about it. And I hope you guys are having a great weekend. Bye!